like almost 150 years of quiescence since the last eruption that occurred in 1864 to 1866, and in 2010 we had the first eruption of this recent activity. So this is a drawing from this last activity in 1865 and a similar view of the volcano in 2020. So to give you an idea of what has been this recent activity, here I have the fresh ash component of the ashes. This is data from Geoffroy Avard. And here we have the first signs of reawakening happened in the 90s, but then the first eruption occurred in 2010. Then in 2012, 11, 12, and 13, we have some yearly eruptions. And the more important activity started by the end of 2014, when we see some increases in juvenile component, and the eruptions are longer and more important in its emissions. But it is by 2017 when we see a big increase in the juvenile component, and the emissions became more continuous, almost continuous, and we see now strombolian activity. Here the end of this graph is 2019, because this is the year that I started this research. So anyways, in 2019 to 2020, what we see is a decrease on the activity. So here we have the most important part of this development of the activity. This is the same time range, but I am showing let's say the background tremor. This is the RSEM amplitude of the seismic signal. And what is important in here is that we have these drops of the tremor, of the amplitude of tremor before some of the eruptions. For example, here in 2010, before the first eruption, or here in 2013, or in hearing before the 2016 eruption. Also, I'm showing here with this line, this continuous line, the magnitude 5.5, the largest earthquake in this recent activity. And its position is, or its time of occurrence is very interesting here, because we have this transition to an open conduit system in a slow reawakening process. This process is slow, so we can study its stages one by one. So this is very interesting. Yeah, so this is the tremor drops before some of the eruptions, and this is what is called tremor quiescence in the literature. And well, I'm gonna talk about this precursory activity, or maybe inactivity. So this is a behavior that it's been observed in other volcanoes. For example, at Suwano-Sejima in Japan, there's a very short scale tremor interruption before some of the explosions. This is in a matter of seconds, but also in a, let's say, short scale of 30 minutes or so at the Lika volcano. This is a work from Diana Roman. There's some tremor quiescence before some of the explosions in an ongoing eruption. Also in the Lika volcano, there's some observations of drops in seismicity, both in tremor and also in the discrete events before of the eruption. And this is in matter of weeks to months. This let's say, long scale. So this is what we see at Turrialba volcano. We see, at least during 15 days before the eruptions, this drop in tremor, in background tremor amplitude. So there is these relations that can be made between the gas flux and tremor in general, and also tremor quiescence. So this is data of SO2 flux from Martin de Mor, or from in Turrialba volcano, where we see this drop in the SO2 flux at the same time that we see this drop in seismic amplitude. Similarly, at Poás volcano, again, we have the SO2 to CO2 ratio. We see this drop before the eruption, and also we see the same behavior in the background tremor. And there are some studies of more formal correlation about this relationship of the SO2 flux and tremor, and we see a good correlation. This is the work from Conde and others. And there's also other works, like, for example, this in Campi Flegray, where they see some very good correlation between some characteristics of the fumaroles with with tremor, with RSAM analysis. So the idea that this observation suggests is we have a ceiling of the hydrothermal system, and this is an idea from Martin de Mor and John Sticks. And maybe we have this magmatic body that is rising and is degassing, so maybe it's interacting with the hydrothermal system, and in this interaction we have precipitation of minerals. So this can lead to clog the conduits, and then the flux and the circulation of fluids stops, and this will build up a pressure in the system until the rocks cannot hold on more because its strength is surpassed, and then we have the eruptions. So this is the kind of explosion mechanism that has been proposed for Turrialba, also with some petrographic evidence. This is a rock that was ejected after the 2014 eruption, and we see that it has these minerals, these hydrothermal minerals that could be part of this seal that is happening. So we see that maybe tremor, quiescence of tremor before the eruptions corresponds to this interruption of the flux of gases and fluids in the system. And the question now is, what other seismic clues could give us a better idea of what is going on in this process of a sealing and then a rupture to provoke these eruptions. So we are the idea of this work is to investigate these three moments, these three stages in 2009, 13, and 16, and we selected these because we knew that there were some interesting signals that occurred in those moments, and also we selected only those that had an abrupt and sustained decrease. We see here that there's an abrupt decrease in amplitude, and then it is the low amplitudes are sustained by at least 15 days. And also these three moments are very important in understanding of the development of all the recent activity, because we have the first eruption in 2010. In 2013 we have this low activity low seismicity that could give us idea of also what is happening. And in 2016, we have the transition to now the open conduit stage of the eruptions. So the methods that we applied were just general seismicity characterization with continuous analysis of the signal, the amplitude, the spectral amplitude, and also some trigger to detect discrete events. Then we do a more detailed analysis of the signal in those stages to recognize events, maybe cluster them by cross correlation and characterize them. This is the most important part of the work with its energy characteristics, and especially also the spectral characteristics. And we perform also a little bit of location only for the 2016 stage because of the development of the seismic network in that moment. So I'm gonna show you some results. I hope I don't get too much into details and don't do it very complicated. So the main precursors that we identified are this LP event or long period event with a harmonic tremor, always with the LP event. And this occurred all in 2009, but also in 2013 and 2016 stages, but especially in 2009. In 2013, this event is similar. It has a long period event and also tremor, but in this case, this tremor is not harmonic, it's broadband spectrum with high frequencies here. And well, we think that maybe there is a relationship between these two types of events, and I'm gonna discuss it further later. And in 2016, we had this different kind of signal. We have this LP, long period event, followed by this multi-tonal coda. In this case, is not tremor because it's not an continued or sustained excitation. It's just the ringing and decreasing amplitude of this coda. It is not harmonic because the different frequency peaks are not regularly spaced. So, well, this is the average number of events per day of these three families of events in each one of these stages. So I'm gonna talk about a little about this first stage that occurred before the first eruption, and that was dominated by this event, the LP plus harmonic tremor. So for this signal, our interest is to detect differences or changes, variations in the fundamental frequency and overtones of this tremor. So we use the substrum analysis to extract that information, and we analyze the variations over time of different characteristics, the duration, amplitude, number of overtones, fundamental frequency, the change in fundamental frequency, number of events per hour, and we compare all those with the background tremor. So there's some interesting trends here, like the decrease in LP duration, or maybe the slightly decrease in the fundamental frequency. But what is most interesting here is these moments in green that this green bar here, that I call M1, M2, and M3, that are seismic minimums, because we see this drop in background tremor at the same time that the number of these events, LP plus harmonic tremor, decrease also, especially in this moment here. And what we see in that moment is a proximal VT volcano tectonic swarm earthquakes, and also very important changes in these signals, in the harmonic tremor and LP signals. So what we see is, this is a more graphical view of this change. We see after the events before this moment and after. So this is from 9 to 10 a.m. of that day, and then to 20 to 23 on that day also. And what we see is some interesting changes. For example, the period doubling, that's the frequency, the fundamental frequency of tremor drops by a factor of 2. Also, the tremor becomes less harmonic, and also the amplitudes are higher in this moment, and the durations are longer. For example, this is the last event that we detect in this sequence, and then it follows a broadband, high amplitude tremor, and then the eruption began. So there's a lot of models to understand the harmonic tremor in volcanoes, and we think that maybe this model by Julian, the flow-induced vibration model, can explain some of the observations that I have just showed to you. So the idea is that we have a conduit or a crack that is where the fluids flow and circulate, traverse it, and this will impose a vibration to the elastic walls of this fracture. And the interesting thing is that this model, what happens is that when we increase the pressure of this flow, the frequency will go down, or the period of oscillation will double by a factor of 2, obviously. So we see here that the frequency goes down and down and down, and then when the pressure is increased. And also what happens is that the spectrum becomes less harmonic, more chaotic, more broadband like, and this is what we see here also. So also this there are some features that we observed in some of the events, like this, let's say, apparent harmonics, odd harmonics intermittence, and we see that the 1, 3, 5, 7 harmonics disappear or appear at some moments, and maybe this is what we are looking, the fluctuations of pressure in this conduit. Okay, so that was for the first stage. Now for the 2013, this is different because the levels of seismicity and the eruptions were lower. But it's interesting because we have two kinds of precursor signals, the LP plus tremor, not harmonic, and also the LP plus harmonic tremor. And maybe there's a relationship between the two. So just to give you a general idea of what's happening, here we have the discrete events triggered by the STL-LTA algorithm. Here we have the high frequency to low frequency ratio of those events, then the background tremor, and the spectral amplitude of this signal. And what is interesting here is that we have this high frequency tremor that might be something fumarolic, like it has been observed in other volcanoes. And the events, the discrete events have an increase during this moment. So it's tremor quiescence, but at the same time we have more seismic activity. This is something that is happening. And the most important family is this one. We have these LP events with some tremor with them. So maybe that, and this tremor is high frequency, the same as that this general spectral amplitude. So what we're seeing here, some sort resumptions of this tremor that happens at moments where this seal in the hydrothermal system cannot hold on this pressure. So again, we extract some characteristics from these events. Here we don't have the fundamental frequency and overtones of the spectrum, but there's some interesting things also. For example, in this moment, what happened is that we saw this high frequency tremor that occurred at this moment, and we see some changes that occur after that. So for example, the amplitude of the events goes up, then the frequency goes, there's like two main frequencies of the tremor, of the LP plus tremor events, and also the frequency, the maximum frequency goes down and the spectrum became more narrow. So this is what we are seeing. Maybe the spectrum is becoming more narrower when we have more energy in the system. So, well, this is the changes I just described: an amplitude and duration increase, change in frequency, and a spectrum more concentrated. And also we had LP plus harmonic tremor, but not in the same number, or less events. So we compare here the LP plus tremor and LP plus harmonic tremor. And what it's interesting is that the number of events of the LP plus harmonic tremor goes up with the background tremor. And if we compare the spectra of LP events from both types of signals, we see that they are very similar. So maybe what's happening is that we have the same process going on, but in this case, there's not sufficient pressure to generate this harmonic tremor to create this resonance of the walls of this conduit that is vibrating. Okay, so now for the 2016 stage. This is, remember that this is the last is part of this stage in the transition to an open conduit phase, before we see this on continuous emissions and strombolian activity. And the main precursor at that moment was this LP with multitonal coda that could resemble the tornillos that were so called in Colombia, in Galeras volcano. So this is, for me, the more interesting stage of the three. And here we have the number of events per day of the, let's say, tornillos. And here we have the number of events per day per cluster. These are the families that were clustered together by cross correlation. And there is some interesting things in here, like I also plot some minor ash emissions in red. Then the volcano tectonic swarms events are here in blue. And these two are distal events, and this in here is a proximal VT swarm, and the eruption began in this red bar here. And what we see in this these 2 days or almost 3 days here is that these events stopped, then the tremor resumes, and then the eruption occurs. There is some interesting things, like before this swarm of events, we see the number of this cluster going up, and also this family is very time tightly concentrated after this swarm. Is there any relationship? I'm not suggesting it right now, but it might be. We'll talk about it later. So we were able to do some location in this period because we had more stations, and in this case, this event has this long or very long period pulse here. So we were able to filter out this event, and this kind of signal is not affected by trajectory and side effects. So we can do the polarization of the waveform and try to locate the source of this event. And what we see is a tight cluster located some 500 meters below the active crater that is located in this point here. We have 3 craters, and the active one is this one. So this is the location that we have for this signal. So now let's talk about those frequency peaks. And this is very important because the model is almost is very general across all of these types of signals in tornillo-like signals, or that has been observed in some volcanoes, is that maybe we have this oscillation of a fluid inside a closed cavity. So what experimental data from Facio shows is that this cavity must be closed, and the differential of pressure must be high to occur. So this is consistent with the idea of a seal of the hydrothermal system, that maybe we have these cavities that are sealed, so the gas that enters can oscillate in this fashion. So the frequency of these oscillations will show in the signal that we see. So we extract the frequency peaks of these signals, and the results are very interesting. Here we have the variation of these frequencies in this time period, and what we see is that every single peak varies independently. That's very different from harmonic tremor, where all the overtones behave similarly because they are just the overtones of a same frequency. But in this case, we see different behaviors. So I'm plotting here the band between 1.6 and 1.75 hertz, and then 2 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7. So there are very narrow ranges of variations. And what we see in all the frequency, I'm showing here only the first 7 hertz, but you see here that we have peaks above almost up to 20, 25 hertz. So what we see is this variation, this pattern where we see this decrease in frequency, and this is what we typically see in other volcanoes, in Tungurahua, Galeras, also in Japan. There's always this decrease of frequency before the eruptions. But in this case, what we see also is this increase and decrease of the frequency. Um, so, some of these changes can be related also again to the volcano tectonic swarms, like we see in here that after this swarm we see this increase in frequency and then a decrease, and then after this second swarm we see again an increase in frequency and then a decrease, and then this proximal VT swarm occurs, and then no more tornillo events occurred. So this is very interesting. The CODA Q factor of quality factor of attenuation, it's highly variable and it's difficult to measure because we have so many frequency peaks, but in general it is high, above 200. So this maybe suggests that the fluid that is oscillating in this cavity might be some kind of gas, maybe with some ash or water drops, in something in that type of fluid. So in this first stage of decrease of frequency, this could mean different things, maybe a combination of this, maybe the crack or this cavity is growing and maybe also drying up, so this will lower the frequency. And also if some ash is added to this fluid, also the frequency will go will decrease. And in the second moment, if we have a volcanotectonic swarm, this could be suggesting some magma injection, and this will increase the temperature. And if the temperature increases, the particles of this gas will have more energy. So the oscillations will be faster. So this is what would bring the frequency up. And then maybe we have this is kind of a cycle that repeats itself. And then we have the decrease of the frequency, then another injection of magma, the temperature increases, and then also the frequency of these events increases. And then with the last swarm, we see that maybe that was the rupture of this seal. We had this we don't have more events of this kind of tornillo, so the seal is open, and then the activity, the eruptive activity can begin. So I'm gonna give just a general overview to try to assemble this puzzle and try to connect these three moments in this activity. For that, it's important that we talk a little about some other signals that are related, that are not exclusive to these tremor quiescence stages, but that are very similar. And I'm using, and I'm going to show some work from Javier Pacheco and Mauricio Mora. And there is also harmonic tremor, but this is long lasting, to minutes to hours harmonic tremor. And it's different because the other harmonic tremor was after one LP event, and also it was short in duration. Then we have multitonal tornillos, and these also are different in that we don't have this high energy in excitation at the very first moment. This is interesting because we have almost all of the energy is in the coda, in these frequency peaks. And then this is a very important signal. This is we call them the double phase signals, because they have these two phases and are the seismic expression of explosions. But what it's interesting is that this expression, the visual expression of of these signals changed over time. When the system was closed in 2015, these were very contained explosions, very inner deep explosions. But in 2017 and 18, there were strombolian activity with rock ejections. So these events also could present this multitonal coda. This is very interesting because we have the same kind of explosion, but with a multitonal coda. So maybe there's some relationship, or maybe there's some connected sources of these two types of events. So here we have the time series of these three signals from all the recent activity from 2010 to 2019. And what we have here is the tornillo, the double phase, and the harmonic tremor. And something very interesting is that, again, we see this relationship in 2000, and by the end of 2015, we see that there was a big increase in both types of signals. And also this, let's say, sequence of events, like first tornillos, then double phases, and then harmonic tremor. Just the harmonic tremor was just its better expression was at the end of all this activity. So the frequency of the tornillo goes down from about 10 hertz in 2012 to about 8.8 hertz in September 2016. So again, we see this decrease of this frequency may be related to a expansion of this cavity, obviously, because the volcano is, the magma is working its way out to the surface. So the spaces, the conduits became bigger. So the double phase explosion changed. I already mentioned this, the expression in surface. So in 2015, the expression was little or not so evident, but in 2017, the expression of these explosions was more important in the surface. And in the harmonic tremor, this is a work from Mauricio Mora, and what we see is that the fundamental frequency changes, and the higher frequencies of this harmonic tremor are here in mid 2017 to 2018, and this is coincident with the lava pool that was observed by Geoffrey Havard, and also by some observation by drone by Paulo Ruiz, and we see this beautiful lava pool, and maybe that is somehow related to these changes in frequency of the harmonic tremor. So finally, by 2017 and 19, we started to see these beautiful explosions. This is the seismic signal related to one of those, and we also have the video of it. Yeah, so very beautiful expression of this strombolian activity with these fresh lava rocks, bumps of fresh lava. So just to end this talk, this is like the interpretation that we made of all these observations, and trying to collect data from deformation, gases, and also geomorphic observations of the crater, and the low frequency signals that we analyze give us some understanding of what is happening in the shallow parts of the system. So again, these years between the 90s and 2009, where there was the reawakening and the intrusions. We start to see some seismicity and also more degassing. And then in 2010, we have the first eruption. And there was, after that eruption, we see this first vent here that formed after that eruption. So we have this hydrothermal sealed system, and maybe some rising magma that is interacting with the hydrothermal system. And we think that those LP with harmonic tremor events corresponds to some inner explosions in the hydrothermal system. And then the harmonic tremor is the circulation, the flow of those liberation gases that are liberated through the cracks that connect to the surface. So this process goes on, and then we have the first explosion. And then in the years 2010, 2011, 12, we have more vents that opens up in the crater. And in 2013, we see these events of LP with harmonic tremor and also non-harmonic tremor. And maybe by this time, the system was not very sealed, so the tremor is not so harmonic. And we began to see the tornillos events, these multi-tonal coda events that require to be in a closed cavity with high pressure gases circulating or oscillating, and that are maybe closer to the magma body rising. Then between 2014 and 2015, we have opening of the conduits. We have more magmatic intrusions. The volcano-tectonic activity increases, and also we start to see these double phase explosions. And also the content of ashes, fresh juvenile ashes increases. And maybe we have a system of conduits more developed by that time. And we see that the tornillos are more important at that moment. And the cavity where where those events occur is bigger and more connected with the magma body. And we have some measurements of the bottom of the crater taken by Paulo Ruiz in 2016 and 2017. And we see this 200 meters difference. And by 2017, we see that the crater is more deep, and we finally see the lava lake or pool, and and we start to see the harmonic tremor with long-lasting harmonic tremor finally, and some strombolian explosions. So maybe the frequency of this harmonic tremor is controlled by with the height of the magma column. So when the magma column rises, the frequency becomes higher also, because the conduit becomes shorter, and vice versa. So, well, that's the general overview of this recent activity of Turrialba volcano. And just to conclude, well, for me, the most important things is that we have this tremor quiescence, and that can occur in response of hydrothermal system. So these are important signs that we have to look. And also this condition of a seal can facilitate the resonances, because we have more pressure to create these resonances, both harmonic and multitonal codas. And the evolution of this characteristic, as has been shown, is very interesting and important to see, to understand these processes, and also to monitor the activity of the volcano. So in the future, we think we have to try to incorporate this analysis in the monitoring activities, and also try to model maybe more mathematical or more experimental ways these observations, to have a clearer view of what's happening in those stages. So thank you. I think that there might be questions. I don't know how much time I did take. But
thank you, Leonardo. That's really great. I think that was fantastic. And there is time for some questions and discussion. And so there are a number of questions in the chat, but please feel free to also use the raise the hand function if you'd like to ask a question. And as I read these questions, if you want to unmute yourself and add any details, feel free to do so. So I'm going to, Leonardo, if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is a question from Maria. And the question is, are these drops in tremor recordings related to blockage that prevent transport of fluids through pathway and cracks? And she adds, a blockage can also be due to the emplacement of bodies of magma intruded. And I can read it again. You can read it yourself if you need.
Yes, we think that this seal or blockage will prevent the circulation, transport of fluids. So, and that will show in the seismic signal. So this background tremor is always active in volcanoes. So if we see this drop, that could mean that the fluids are blocked and cannot be transported by these pathways. And yes, also if we have this magma body rising, it would exert some deformation, and maybe close also those pathways and cracks by deformation, and that might be also be working.
Thanks, Leonardo. Next question is from Michael Manga. When the tremor is harmonic, are gliding signals typical?
In this case, in Turrialba volcano, we've seen gliding effects from about 1 to 3 hertz range. So there is quite some gliding, not unlike in Redoubt volcano. There was a beautiful harmonic tremor that the gliding was from, I think, 1 hertz to 30 hertz. That is very interesting. But there is also other volcanoes. For example, here at the moment we have seen some harmonic tremor at Rincón de la Vieja that has a more important hydrothermal system, and what we see is a very stationary, very steady frequency in the harmonic tremor. So there are wide variations in harmonic tremor, and in Turrialba we see some gliding.
And just to follow up, thanks again for the very nice talk. Do you typically see an increase in frequency during the gliding rather than, and it never decreases back down?
Maybe I can exemplify this with one of the plots. We see both. We see typically it increases and then decreases. For example, here, well, this doesn't show very well, but we see, well, here is not very visible, but we see a slightly increase, and then, well, it continues steady, but we see in some cases the increase and then decrease.
Thanks. And it looks like this is a question from Leif Karlstrom. For the harmonic tremor, is non-integer spacing of overtones ever observed? Some models of crockless resonance, for example, predict frequency ratios of 3 to 2.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that could be what we are seeing, because we see this odd harmonics, let's say like that, or harmonics intermittence, but let's say the first, the third, the fifth harmonic disappear. So this could be that ratio that you're talking about. I have to look into it. But the point is that the thing is that they are evenly spaced, even if the ratio is different.
Thanks, that's great. And
I don't know if that answers
if
the question.
you want to jump in, you can, but that's a good answer.
Oh,
Maybe
sure.
I'll follow through with the Slack discussion too.
Yeah, I guess the particular three halves, I don't know, how much I believe that, but I guess the question is, yeah, are there non-integer spacing? Because that would suggest a different resonant phenomena, perhaps, than the organ pipe thing.
Yeah, I haven't looked into different ratios. That's interesting. But thanks for the suggestion.
All right, I think that is the end of our chat questions, it looks like, unless other folks have questions they'd like to bring up right now. Otherwise, Leonardo, if you have a couple minutes, we might just stick around and answer any little questions that people have that they don't want to ask to everybody. But thanks again, everyone, for showing up, and thanks, Leonardo, for a really great talk. Join us next week. We're going to hear about the Taupo volcanic zone from Lydia Harmon of Vanderbilt. Take care, everybody, and remember to vote if you can.
Thank you.